Hey guys, my name is Steve Guttenberg. That's Miguel. We made a couple of videos pre-COVID.
Yes.
And the thing is, we're back because you just got a turntable. It's not your first turntable, but...
No, it's not. But I haven't had a turntable for 8+ years. Yeah. So, I wanted to get one because I have a bunch of records. And I like the tinkering.
Right. So, I mean, you have this incredible system, the Avantgarde speakers, the audio note electronics, a killer DAC, the DCS DAC. So, before your turntable arrived, you were at a super high level of serious audiophile stuff. And when you set out to buy a turntable, you were thinking, I got to buy a turntable that the equal of my digital, or
yes.
hopefully better than your digital, right?
In fact, the Rega P2 I had, I gave to my nephew because, it was just not sort of in line with the rest.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of flabbergasted about the idea that you did this because, like I said, your digital is so good. So as soon as you did this and you bought the SME 20, it's a 20, right?
It's a 20, yeah. I
thought, well, we have to do a video about comparisons, how you feel about the difference between listening to super high-end digital and super high-end analog. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the whole thing, I mean, the idea that playing a plastic disc with a diamond running around the groove that can sound remotely good, and you're a physicist, does that make any sense to you? Is that even possible? I mean, it's possible, we live with it, but it seems impossible. It seems like magic.
When I was a kid, I thought it was magic. As I grew up and I sort of learned physics and also, sort of looked at, I worked in high energy physics, so a lot of it has to do with precision measurement and precision engineering, right? No, I'm not super surprised that it works, right? To be honest.
Really?
Yes.
Especially when you figure in that when you play records, right? The record is a copy of a copy of a copy, and there's many steps to manufacturing a piece of plastic, making records. It just seems like fraught with every step of the way. There's going to be problems.
Absolutely, and there's the one-step process, right, where the stamper used right out of the what do you call it?
The lathe.
The lacquer, right out of the lacquer, gets used to press, right? Versus the three-step where that stamper presses another lacquer, then presses another stamper, and this third generation, I guess, is used to press. There is a difference in sound there. So yes, there is loss. As you go through generations, there is loss.
Right, and in digital, basically there's no loss.
Yeah, but it has other issues, right?
Well, yeah. Hence the reason we're going to have this conversation.
Right.
So, because you already had a turntable, were you prepared? Did you have any? What were your expectations when you had the turntable set up by our mutual friend Michael Trey?
Right.
The best, certainly, that I know. What did you think that you were getting into?
So, I mean, I've listened to your turntable, I've listened to a bunch of high-end turntables, so I kind of knew what sound to expect, right? It was miles ahead of my P2, no question, right? What I didn't really realize is how much fun I'm having with it, right? Which, it took me 8 years to get this thing, right? But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and a lot of fun listening to stuff and discovering new stuff, and sometimes even doing the geeky thing of comparing how the same album sounds in digital versus the turntable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can listen to high-res files. You're streaming.
Right.
You're not playing CDs.
Or DSD files that I have.
Right.
Like I have a Nina Simone from Analog Productions that was produced in 2015. And I bought at the time the LP because I knew that I would want to make this comparison at some point.
Yes.
Right, so I bought this thing before it disappeared, right? And I bought the SACD and I ripped the SACD into a DSD file. And so I can actually compare the DSD file with the vinyl that were produced at the same time from the analog tape.
So the same master for both.
Same tape. In fact, my understanding was it's the same tape playing, right? And it was being encoded to DSD and cut at the same time.
And
the vinyl sounds better.
Okay,
in that particular case.
Define better. That's the next question.
It's more alive. Nina Simone's, the depth of her voice, it's hard to explain, but there's more like depth to her voice, right? The DSD sounds fantastic, right? If you don't compare, you say, yeah, this is great. And I've listened to the DSD 500 times, right? But, you know, the vinyl is a little better. I don't want to say, though, that vinyl is always better. That's not what I'm trying to say here, right? It's just, in this particular case, right, with a very, very sort of close lineage of the sound.
Right, the source for
yes,
both,
the
right?
vinyl has a bit of a more organic sound. Maybe that's the term I want to use. But I don't want to say that every vinyl will sound better than their digital versions.
Well,
That's
when it comes to doing these comparisons, knowing that the source is remotely the same, much less exactly the same,
it's very hard to do.
Really hard to do. So when people say one sounds like this, well, but there's so many unknowns that it's really kind of impossible. But in this case, you're starting with that knowledge.
Yeah.
Because I would say, as a blanket statement, with obvious exceptions, that to me, vinyl on a good turntable, arm cartridge, phono preamp it sounds more like the idea of what high-res is. And when I listen to high-res digital, Chesky, audiophile recordings done in high-res, or just high-res transfers from analog tapes, to me, good vinyl sounds more like what that is in my head. And when I listen to high-res digital, it doesn't sound as high-res. It doesn't sound as believably live, real. We're capturing this sound of this music and putting it into a recording. That analog at its best does that better. No questions asked. One of the things I've known all along, once I got into good turntables, my first high-end turntable was a Lin, is how much less record surface noise, clicks, pops, just whoosh, was pushed further into the background. It was less like, it drew your attention less, we'll put it that way, right? And as you get a better and better turntable, it's less and less. It's amazing because, especially for a system like yours, which is very, very high resolution, you have these incredible Avantgarde acoustic speakers, and we were playing records before we started to shoot the video, and I'm thinking, it's so freaking quiet. It's not that it's not there. I would never say that analog is 100% noise-free. It just doesn't call your attention to it. Right?
Yes, that's right.
The music is what you're hearing, and the noise is pushed back.
And honestly, for some reason, the few ticks and pops don't really bother me that much.
Yeah. Well, if they bother you, then you shouldn't buy a turntable.
Right. Yes.
But it's funny. Again, we were talking before we started. There was all this hubbub about laser turntables 20 or so years ago.
Yes.
And we said, oh, great, we get rid of the mechanical part of the stylus tracing a groove, and now it's going to sound so much better. But it didn't. And you're, as I said, you're a physicist, so you got this laser reading the groove. There's no mass involved. And yet it doesn't sound as good as a good cartridge and a good transfer.
I'm not surprised.
Why? Superficially, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, so I'm thinking this on the fly.
Okay.
Okay, but some of it I had thought before.
Okay.
Right? So how does encoding in this thing works, right? If you have the groove, right, the motions up and down of the groove, right, are what's called left minus right. So the signal that represents this is left minus right. The signal that represents this is left plus right. So a mono record only has this motion, right? A stereo record has both, right? And the way a cartridge is constructed is it has the coils, right? are at an X, right? And so what happens is by construction, you decipher these left plus right, left minus right, and left plus right. Okay? But think about it this way, right? The angle of the groove is not a square angle, right? So if
it's not 90 degrees.
Right, it's not 90 degrees. It's a little tighter, right? So or not, it doesn't matter. It's just, so my point is this, right? When I trace it with a mechanical thing, right, I'm essentially what angle I have doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's going to reproduce what the cutting head did, right? Whereas when I'm doing it with optical, right, my optical head needs to know everything, right? It needs to follow every single movement, right? And it needs to kind of know the angle probably, or at least see the angle very, very, very clearly to not get fooled, right? And so my guess is I'm not surprised, let me put it that way, that an optical turntable doesn't work that well. This is different from an optical cartridge though, right?
Right.
Because the optical cartridge simply is a stylus, right?
Right.
Instead of having coils, right, it has some sort of optical tracking. That I can imagine works great.
Right. So I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. But reading, taking a picture, if you will, of a continuous picture of the groove doesn't sound to me like a good idea.
Right. Of course, it's interesting that the whole laser turntable thing is up 20 or so years ago. I don't know that anybody's made more recent attempts, with better technology to do it now.
I don't know if it's better technology, but I think I've seen a new one coming out, like sort of like product.
Okay.
But I don't expect that to sound great, to be honest.
Interesting.
I might be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I find the whole thing incredible that records can sound good and amazing.
Yeah, but if you think about the physics of it, right? The sizes involved. This is tiny to the eye or the finger.
The stylus.
Right.
Okay.
But in terms of physical process or in terms of manufacturing, it's not. Right. People can do really, really precise things these days, much tighter than the tolerance in a groove and things like that.
And you've taken these amazing pictures. Were you doing that with your phone? Those pictures of the cantilever?
I took a few pictures with my phone, but the really close-up pictures are with a USB microscope.
Okay. They look amazing.
Yeah, and it's super easy. And it's a $30 device.
Oh, well, what is it called?
USB microscope.
Okay.
You look for it on Amazon. There are 500 different ones. So,
okay. So you're in this mode now of buying records.
Yeah.
A lot of records?
This is the thing, right? With streaming, I know what I mean, there are records that I know and I want to buy. And then there are records that, look interesting, and streaming allows me to listen to what the music is right before I even commit.
Right.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think that's great. You do have to reset your price scale, right? Because I used to
free versus paying $30.
Well, no, but I digital, I actually buy everything I like in digital. And the reason is because, streaming services drop stuff all the time.
Right.
They really do. I don't know if people are paying attention or not, but really, I mean, all sorts of stuff gets just completely dropped. Right. So when there's something that I really like, when I find something I really like in digital, I buy it in digital. But every time it was more than $10, I was like, oh, that's expensive. Right? Now with records, like I find $22 records, and I'm like, okay, that's cheap.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah.
Any big surprises in records that you've bought that they were a lot better or worse than what you expected, sound quality wise?
Well, so there's a new series by Blue Note, the classic series or whatever it's called, which is quite an amazing quality series. They really sound great.
Do you have any original Blue Notes?
I don't think so. I have a bunch of Blue Notes. Maybe some are original. I don't know. When I was a student, I bought a bunch of records at Secondhand Tunes in Hyde Park in Chicago. I was a student at the University of Chicago. And and I bought Blue Notes. Maybe some of them are actually original. I'm not sure.
Or earlier pressings, at least.
Yes.
We need Ken Mikhailov here to decode which ones are which.
That's right. Yes.
And you're a mono guy. You like mono?
I love mono. Mono, I think it's very interesting. The thing with mono, right, is that it's not just mono. Meaning, many of the records that are in mono also. So, for example, Aretha Franklin has a bunch of records that are in both versions, and the recording balance in each version is completely different, like night and day, right? So I find it very interesting to listen to both versions because they really are very different.